Awesome. Well, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, ngā mihi nui ki tō koutou mahi mō ngā rangatahi, mō ngā mokopuna, mō ngā tamariki. Kia ora. No Ingarani, no Kotirana, no Haina, no Merehia oku tupuna, he Haina mana ahau, he Pākehā ahau hoki. Ko Etienne tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you everyone for receiving me here today. It's so lovely to be here, and I just want to repeat thank you for the work that you are doing for our young people. It really encourages me, and when I saw the strategy going through, I was very excited and thought, yes, I definitely wanted to submit on it. And part of that is because I am, among other things, an early career researcher at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University, and I've just written a thesis on children's rights and the rights of mokopuna Māori, and so this is a topic that's very close to my heart. That paper was specifically about the rights of ngā mokopuna to te reo Māori, so that's a focus of my submission today. And I'm also looking at starting a PhD on tangata tiriti and tangata whenua, so that's also part of the whakaaro that I bring. And I want to reiterate that I am tangata tiriti, I am not Māori, so everything that I have hopefully came from someone who is far more qualified than me to speak on this first. I'm just the person who's here today. So, I wanted to start with one specific thing and then move on to looking at kind of what I might see as the po of the framework. The specific thing that I saw, I was really excited to find out today that Te Kaunihera also had a reo Māori strategy. It looks quite good, and I saw that there was a lot of overlap in that with the children and young people strategy. But there was one omission that I saw, and that was in the short-term plan on how to make Wellington a te reo Māori capital in the young person strategy. There was actually nothing concrete on how to do that particular part of it. And I think we all know that our young people are a key part to the revitalisation of te reo and the language is theirs. And so probably maybe need like something slightly more detailed about what's going to happen in the next 3 years to do with young people in te reo Māori if we're going to get to this 2040 or 2050 goal. The three main things that I want to talk about apart from this, just that I attached the article Oranga Mokopuna. If anyone's interested in that, it's what I wrote one of my theses on, and it traces rights through a te ao Māori perspective rather than starting at some UN document and trying to trickle down here. In that paper and in my paper, it's argued that mokopuna rights stem from whakapapa and are conceived in tikanga Māori and then flow through te tiriti and then are re-articulated in these international covenants. And I just wanted to bring that to the Council's attention just to check that we're starting from the right place and not just starting with some UN treaty or something or other. So if we're looking at mokopuna rights, are we starting by like saying that they are rooted in whakapapa and flow from there, as opposed to something granted by a UN document. Somewhat related, also, I think I saw some of the other submissions, they were asking for a greater focus on papatuanuku, and just like te reo, we know that the future of papatuanuku is to some extent in the hands of the young people, and the young people are among the most passionate for it. So it seems like another odd omission in the strategy to not have more references to the environment in papatuanuku there. The final main thing that I wanted to say from a perspective of someone researching tangata tiriti and tangata whenua is like just checking we're not leaving the rest of tangata tiriti out at the door there. Often this relationship has been stylized as one between Māori and Pākehā, but we know that when the Crown assumed rights to immigration, they also brought in a whole lot of other people who are here now as well by virtue of that through te tiriti. So just checking that this isn't just a strategy that is for Pākehā and for Māori, but that it is for all tangata tiriti and all tangata whenua. Nō reira, tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Oh, kia ora, Etienne. I could have asked you a lot of questions there. Really interesting, the whakaaro that you've shared with us, and we'll definitely be looking into your work. But yeah, we've run out of time for questions, sorry.
Oh,
but,
kia ora.
Kia ora, tēnā koe.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure. I'll come back next time.
Kia ora. So now I'd like to welcome Karen Brightwell and students from Wellington Girls College Year 9 Social Studies. Nau mai, haere mai, kia koutou. Kia ora, Karen. Good to see you. Well, just while you're getting yourself seated, I'll explain what happens. So you have 10 minutes for your presentation, and there's a wee counts down to 0. And if you do have any time left over, we might have some questions for you. But thank you so much for coming in, and we look forward to hearing from you. Kia ora.
Hi, we're Wellington Girls College, and we're here to talk about Wellington City Council strategy for children and young people. As a class, we looked at the proposal and completed written submissions. We appreciate being able to give a verbal submission.
This is a summary of our own and our class's ideas, and some of the things from your proposal we liked are free cultural events and musical events. We liked the moving of the fireworks to Matariki, more indoor play places for younger kids, and we appreciated the increase to push the use of te reo Māori around the city.
It sounds like it is. Yep.
As a class, we found the big thing you were missing from the proposals are strategies and ideas that would help teenagers. We have one idea, which is the Youth Hub, a place where teenagers can hang out, feel safe, a place where we're not judged by adults and younger, smaller children. Some ideas we thought of that would be good in this spot is free charging sports, comfy soft areas, free Wi-Fi, and if you're worried about security, people in colleges each get an ID, and so we could have somewhere where it's like you sign in with your ID when you enter. Having someone employed to make sure that we're safe, and if we ever need help or someone to talk to, we can also talk to them. A place where you could hold a youth group which isn't run by churches, and this group could also be a space where you could ask for help about our well-being. A space like this will mean we get to meet new people and go out and spend more times off our devices, and a safe place for teens who need it.
Besides the Youth Hub, here are some other ideas we had that would be helpful for Wellington. Better communication by the council with teenagers, using more online platforms or advertisements at school, more drinking fountains everywhere, non-binary toilets, having a specific place for graffiti and art, teenage-based playgrounds and more recycling bins.
Oh, tēnā koutou. Councillors, do you have any pātai? Councillor Fitzsimons?
Can you just tell us about the kinds of online platforms we should be using? Like you said, we should do more online. What do you mean by that? Can you just tell us where teenagers are?
Like, most of us... Is my thing still? Yeah, it is. Okay, cool. Sorry. Most of us have, like, Instagram or TikTok, and not just as in, like, posting something, but, like, to do, like, reels. So it's, like... For someone like me, I find it really hard to read, so when people put posts and lots of words, I just don't read it. So if you've got like TikTok or a reel, you're telling me what's going on and I actually understand it more, and then I understand what's going on and I don't miss out on things.
Sorry, what's a reel?
So like...
Showing your age.
So like... Yeah, okay. Like, do you... so it's like a thing on Instagram, you got like... your feed, where it's your feed, and then you've got other like people that you're like following, and then you've got your search page, and then you've got your Reels page. So you tap on your Reels page, and there's like all these videos that like come past.
It's an education for us today. Councillor Matthews.
you. And I think you just gave Councillor Fitzsimon some free social media training, which she does actually need. I'm great to see you here, WGC. My daughter's year 11 at your school, so thank you for all coming. And my question is about like a teenage playground, and what kind of thing could you see being on a teenage playground?
The one thing that I specifically brought up this thing, and it's not just like people in year 9. Like I've brought it up in like student council meetings and people in year 12 want it, and it's that we go to places like Frankett's Park or other playgrounds, and it's either like when you were 6 you went down the slide and it was like wee, and then you go down now and you're like, well, oh that was a lot shorter than I remember. Or you're sitting there in the line waiting for a slide at like Frankett's Park, and a little kid taps you on the back and goes, "You're too big to be on this playground." And you're sitting there and you're like, "But I want to go down the slide."
That's awesome. Councillor O'Neill.
Awesome, thank you all. My question is about the youth hub and people in that age bracket. So do you envision a place for people to hang out after dark, or how late would you kind of want that space to be open, or how long on average do you hang out in town after school and stuff like that? On the weekends, or?
You can.
Okay, I'll say it. Actually,
no,
it's on. So basically, a lot of teens, well, like for me, I don't like staying in town too late, because I feel like once it gets dark, it gets like a whole new like creepiness or whatever. So I'd probably just stay out to like 5-ish, and then I'd like bus home and that kind of stuff. It's like, because I know that a lot of teens just wouldn't want to be out too late. Because and also like parents have like strict rules about like being at home at a certain time and stuff like that.
Just also another thing we wanted to add is the reason that we did bring this up, and it's probably not like part of your control, is that we're not allowed into Papa anymore if you're not under the age of like over the age of 14. And so you go somewhere, and most of the libraries are like absolutely quiet now, so you're just sitting there and you're like, oh, we can't actually go anywhere inside that's easy to like talk to someone or have fun.
Do you know is that really a thing?
Yeah, no, there's like massive posters on Te Papa, and they like go around, and if you're like I've been asked like how old am I, and like they don't like you in there.
So where I guess from that, so where do you go? Because this was a problem when I was your age. I would go to the Central Library, or we'd go like sneak into a cafe somewhere. Where do people end up hanging out? Like at the train station or other places?
They end up. Well, sometimes they end up going home, or they just like wander around town, bouncing from shops to shop, and then until they're sick of it.
And also, basically, in summertime, a lot of kids would go like to Oriental Bay and go swimming and stuff. But in winter, we don't really want to go swimming. So that was the idea of like this. We'd have like teens would have a place to go to feel warmer and actually still have fun in town.
Councillor Pennant.
Thanks, that was awesome. I'm just wondering about things like youth hubs and places like that. How much adult involvement do you want in them? Because we don't sort of want to do stuff that then people just go, they're a bit allergic to because they're not cool enough.
It's not that like, well, for me, I don't find adults like that annoying. Well, lots of people do. They're like, oh, adults, no. But but it's not that like what I'd say is that maybe like 2 or 3 like adults there, and like what I like envisioned is like there's a desk kind of person, like at the library you've got like a desk kind of lady kind of thing, and like to have someone that's there, and it's like if you're like feeling unsafe at like home or like at school, you could like go up to them and like ask them for help, but at the same time they're also there, so if someone like does stuff like that isn't okay, like gets in a fight with someone or like goes around saying things that aren't very nice or like graffitis the wall, they can also be like, hey, that's not okay. So it's like not too much adult involvement where it's like they stop us from like having fun and like sitting down, but like there at the same time.
Councillor Young.
I was going to say, thank you very much for all speaking so clearly, because I can hear every single sort of vowel and consonant, and that's not always the case. So I'd just like to say thank you very much.
That is not a question. Councillor Sparrow.
Thank you for your presentation. Tell me, are there playgrounds around that are specifically or primarily designed for teenagers, and whether there are or aren't, what sort of equipment appeals most to teenagers, other than perhaps a slide that's 50 metres long?
I know this sounds really silly, but like we were doing this in class, and me and my one friend that were on this specific one, which we like each got a group for it, we actually drew our teenager playground and walked around the classroom asking people what they wanted. But the main thing is that when you get to teenagers levels, I find that going on a swing or like on a trampoline is really fun to have things that aren't like always little kid materials. So like, I know that they're not very good, but I've been to this really cool playground on the edge of Kaiwi Beach, and it has this massive witch's hat, and you can swing around on it, and you can fit so many people on it, and it made the whole playground so much more fun. So not like things which are like 50 meters long, but things where it's like to do it together, because we don't want to go down a slide by ourselves. We want to sit with each other with linked arms and go down the slide together kind of thing. So not always like a slide where it's like we all have to wait in line, like we can all like pile on it and like slide down.
Well, tēnā koutou, thank you so much for coming in to share your whakaaro with us. You've had an impact on us already, teaching us some stuff about social media and also helping us see things through other people's eyes. So thank you so much for coming in today. We appreciate that. We hope you come back again.
Thank you.
Karen. So now we have on Zoom Sarah Patterson-Hamlin. Kia ora, Sarah. So Sarah's here speaking from Upside Down's Education Trust, and you have 10 minutes. There might be some questions in that time if there's some time left over. Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you so much for allowing me to present and also to come to you via Zoom. I am based in Auckland. By way of introduction, though, I will say that I half grew up in Wellington. So I'm familiar with the city. My dad lived there from when I was 11. So I have been a young person in Wellington, but I'm presenting today basically on behalf of the Wellington members of our trust. So that's on behalf of children with Down syndrome and their parents. So as I say, I'm representing the trust. We provide speech therapy for children with Down syndrome, and we're currently funding about a quarter of all the children with Down syndrome in Aotearoa. So that's aged between 0 to 21. First of all, I just want to say how awesome the strategy document was and how encouraging and inspiring we found it. We're really enthusiastic to see where the council's going in terms of this kind of thing. I think it shows that everything's going in a really good direction. One phrase that was in there that particularly jumped out was positive early life experiences positively impact future outcomes. Obviously, that's what we're all about. So the founders of Upside Downs decided if you're going to do any one thing to support people with Down syndrome, it's to do early intervention speech and language therapy as young as possible, because that's just going to have a positive flow-on effect for the rest of that child's life. So that's something we really resonated with. And we also really encouraged by the indications in there that Wellington City Council are intending to work with organisations like us or other community organisations that are already there and trying to make a positive impact for young people in Wellington. So I'll just speak to a couple of things in particular from my written submission. One thing that stood out to us was the very broad age range. So in terms of our community, the needs of people in early childhood, primary, secondary education are really, really different to those in that 18 to 24 bracket, and potentially if there was some kind of room to have a subsection of this strategy or just to separate those issues out a little bit. So for example, kind of everything is the number one thing that a lot of our parents are thinking about and preoccupied with is school transition and what happens after school, and sort of living independently and all that kind of thing. Whereas when you're within the education system, you've got a whole different raft and set of concerns. So I'll come on to it a bit later, but the very broad age range was something we kind of bumped on. We wanted to talk a little bit about Focus Area 4. Wellington Welcome celebrates and includes the diversity of all children and young people. Obviously, that appeals to us very much. It's a very cool thing thing to be aiming for. We love the focus on Te Reo and other languages in this section. My assumption is it includes New Zealand Sign Language, though I don't believe it was explicit in the strategy. And what we also want to suggest is a serious consideration of things like speech therapy. It's not just a major for kids with Down syndrome, it's a major for lots of children. And the public provisions currently are vastly inadequate, as most parents of a child with special needs will tell you. So that children can participate in spoken or sign language to the best of their ability. There's a lot of kids right now, kids with Down syndrome, kids with autism, all kinds of things that are being locked out of communication in general just because the support isn't there, but the expertise is there. There's a lot of fantastic speech therapists in this country and in Wellington in particular, actually. So for focus area 5, building lifelong learners, again, really excited about this, really fits with our mahi. And also the focus on pathways and bringing down NEET numbers, NEET, that is. In the Down syndrome community, unemployment is estimated at between 85 and 95%. So that's for adults with Down syndrome in New Zealand. That's obviously incredibly high, incredibly devastating, and something that is a real focus. And then more widely, in terms of disabled youth, I'm sure you know this already, but just to highlight that it's 48.2% not in education, employment or training for disabled youth in New Zealand compared to 10.6% for non-disabled youth. And if you haven't come across it already, I'd really recommend the recent Helen Clark Foundation report, Still Alone Together, which goes into that in a bit more detail. In terms of attracting people, you mentioned attracting young people to Wellington because of its services. Just wanted to back this up and express that anecdotally, I know through speaking to many of our members that there's a lot of families who have taken the decision to move to Auckland when they've had a child with Down syndrome because of the services that are available. So I think that's a really fantastic thing that's been acknowledged in this. And obviously that's health services, but it's also things like early intervention services, speech therapists, obviously music therapy, all those kinds of things. So obviously the same goes for inclusive employment. Obviously a big thing with that 20 to 30 age group you mentioned in terms of that goal. And as I said before, the number one thing that parents are really concerned about when they have a child with special needs is what's going to happen after school when all the support just kind of evaporates at the sort of 18 to 21 point. And that is an increasing thing because in 1960, life expectation for children with Down syndrome was 10. In the year I was born, 1990, it was 30, and now it's more like 60. So there's an increasing period of time, I guess, that we're talking about. In terms of focus area 6, not technically related to my hat that I'm wearing today, but I did just want to highlight the awesome work that UN Youth New Zealand do, and particularly the Aotearoa Youth Declaration in terms of that's just an existing practical mechanism for including young people's voices in decision making. In terms of the action plan, in my written submission, I highlighted the bits we were particularly excited about, but basically the last one I mentioned in that was 6.1 in terms of building trust with diverse groups of young people. And I think that, you know, if the previous things in that action plan are acted on, then that will happen naturally. But that sort of brings me to, I guess, the overall thrust of my argument, if you like, or of my submission, which is just, I guess, a suggestion to not reinvent the wheel where possible. In terms of young people with disabilities, Wellington Early Intervention Trust, Wellington Down Syndrome Association, Us at Upside Downs, the Wellington branch of UN Youth New Zealand, and a bunch of others are all out there doing the mahi and are ready to be kind of empowered and funded and listened to with some really valuable experience that can be helpful. Now, it's not to say that Wellington City Council isn't doing that already. In terms of us, obviously we're quite excited about the 2.4 in the action plan about aligning grant funding objectives with focus areas. We have yet to receive grant funding from Wellington City Council, but we do have 27 children that we fund in the area. So there's things out there that already exist that we think can be really valuable in terms of implementing the strategy. And yeah, I guess I was really excited to read it, and that's partly why I chose to submit, because it seems that the overall goal of the strategy really shares our goal of making sure that young Wellingtonians with disabilities aren't on the margins forever, as they kind of are now, and that are active, contributing, empowered members of the community that are seen and heard, and that has flow-on benefits, not just for them and their whānau, but for everybody. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to me and letting me join you from up north.
Kia ora, Sarah. We do have a part-time question from Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for your submission. I recently went to visit with the Maranga Action Group, who are young people with intellectual disabilities, including young people with Downs, and they really echoed your, the priority on employment. That was the big. They interviewed me and they asked me all about anything they could get a job at council, and they were also very enthusiastic about the idea of a youth hub, like a dedicated space. In the city for young people, and I just wonder if you think, because I know socialising, having friends is such an important part of life, and especially for people, young people with disabilities, and if you think that would be a really good idea for young people with Down syndrome in Wellington.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the challenge with these things is, there's so many needs to take into consideration. In our written submission, we mentioned with Focus Area 1 that in terms of all children feeling safe, that accessibility is a big part of that. So in order for a space to feel safe, it needs to be accessible. And that's obviously, I'm sure you know this already, but no, it's not just wheelchair ramps and things like that. It's consideration of neurodiverse accessibility requirements and things like that. It's interesting that we're just talking to Countdown, who I believe, so the Australian counterparts of Woolworths have created a kind of disability-friendly supermarket space that could just, I don't know, it's just something that occurred to me as being kind of in this zone. But yes, and I definitely think so. And there's a tradition in all kinds of communities for people with visible disabilities to be neither seen nor heard, and the value of that kind of hub that actively welcomes in people with different abilities, I think is a really fantastic goal to have.
Well, kia ora. Thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to join us from Auckland. We appreciate you doing that and sharing your experience with us. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you so much.
Now I'd like to welcome Kieran Palmer to the table. No mai haere mai. Anno. Yeah, so if you sit there and then there's I'm not sure if the microphones are on or not, but you can press a button and on it thing it says push and it goes green if it's on.
There we go. You got me? Yeah.
So
I did have a PowerPoint. Did that not come through? Oh, that is awesome. Thanks, Heidi. Fantastic.
So, and there's a clock there just so you can
good.
See that it's
I'll talk fast. Sorry, people have already heard from me today. They know I talk fast. Sorry. Ko taratahi tamonga, ko rumahanga te awa, ko no te whanganui tara aho, ko Palmer, toko ingoa, ko Kieran. Toko whānau, ko Kieran, toko ingoa. Hi, my name's Kieran. I've been a theatre practitioner in Wellington for over 30 years. I'm also a teacher. I do drama teaching. I do lots of teaching in the community. I work a lot with elderly that Wellington City Council, they support us in that. But my real passion is working with young people, and I just finished a PhD in it. That's how passionate I am about doing theatre and performing arts with young people. So I'm here representing PAPER, which is Performing Arts for Young People Aotearoa, and that is a newly formed entity. We are a network of performing artists and organisations that work, that work for children and create performing arts for children and young people. The overall purpose of the trust is to promote and advance the education and enrichment of children through the performing arts. And one of the main things that we do is we want to support the artists so that they can create the work. So basically, if we can take some of the lobbying and the applying for funding and all that away from the artists so they can create the work, then everyone can experience, or young people can experience performing arts. So, what drives us mahi? Next one is gross underfunding of performing arts for young people, undervaluing of performing arts and performing artists, undervaluing of young people, undervaluing and understanding of the impact of performing arts in education and lives of young people. What needs to change is the way that the performing arts is valued in wider New Zealand society as an essential right and a tool for growth and wellbeing and learning in young people. And I want to give you a little example. So I read an article recently, if you pop that up, Heidi, there's a link to it there, by Professor Peter O'Connor, who says, we know that in Aotearoa skills are killing creativity. The evidence is overwhelming. And he highlights recent research about how the arts have been stripped out of schools. And the same week that I saw that, I got this beautiful letter from Tawa College, which says, we need to be more deliberate. We're changing NCEA. We need to be more deliberate in developing the competencies we know that help students thrive in the world. Things like collaboration, creativity, resilience, critical thinking and courage. And I thought, yeah, no kidding. Okay, so what do you think the arts does, right? And yet we've stripped it all away. So I feel this huge responsibility as an artist and someone that supports artists that we have a huge place to really to really push the performing arts for young people because of the amazing stuff that it can do. Great. So how can Wellington City Council help? I'm sure we're dying to know. So I'm just going to talk to a couple of points, and I've already talked today around some other things around general arts. But by facilitating, and this is a similar point I made this morning, by facilitating genuine consultation with the theatre and performing arts sector, in particular a variety of groups that make the performing arts groups that advocate and work with and for young people. That's not just capital E. Okay, capital E is one thing, and I know that you've talked a lot about capital E in your policy. They are just one cog in the wheel. Okay, so there's a whole lot of other companies, and Paper is now a network that can really talk strongly to who those companies are and who the people are that can talk and who the people that tour to schools are and how difficult. I came from a school this morning. We performed at Mana College. It was the most amazing experience. They all asked about how we can do more in the arts, which was very inspiring. And my second thing that I wanted to talk to was working with the sector towards creating a purpose-based space. It's a theatre space and studios and spaces that are created with young people that's accessible, just like Sarah was talking, and affordable with theatre artists in mind. And at the moment, the thinking is that could be built in the new library space. It could possibly be a home for Capital E, which is desperately, I worked in the heyday of Capital E when we had that beautiful space and that theatre, and we had the discovery space, and it was amazing. And we really felt there was a real hub, and parents would bring their kids, and it was just a really, really buzzing hub, and the theatre artists could work in there as well. So I'm advocating for a space where older children can come, or young people, our rangatahi can come, and they can be in the space, but it's also a theatre space that we can show our capital E, but we can show other works. It's affordable. At the very least, it could be modelled on something like Pātaka in Porirua. You know, you've got your art gallery and you've got your theatre space and you've got your meeting spaces and you've got your library. But at best, it could be like the Unicorn Theatre in London, which was purpose-built for children. I'm not going to go through all the, if you just go into my next slide, what I have done is I've connected it with the strategic documents. The main one, obviously, is the refurbishment of the Central Library, but there's also a lot around delivering more safe and inclusive spaces for young people. This is how this sort of mahi could kind of really feed into all these. In fact, there's 2 pages of connecting with strategic documents. Yeah, so delivering more safe and inclusive spaces for young people, partnering with Capital E, showcasing young cultural performing arts groups and role models. And my time is up. Thank you so much for listening. This is an international body of performing arts for young people, and they want us to say this to all funding bodies and all local funding bodies, is to consider the value of the role of arts for every child in society.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Kieran. Very well done. Awesome.
Yeah.
Just put down individual. You actually could have longer.
Could I?
Because you're representing the organisation.
I am, and I didn't know, yeah. I am representing Paper, yeah, that's true. I didn't know I had longer. I would have spoke slower, I'm so sorry.
We can now read for the next
Roll revved up. Do you have any?
I have a question. My question's about the National Theatre for Children and understanding what we could do, I guess, as far as bringing that together. Because as you say, it's not actually just Capital E that it would potentially be serving. It's a number of different groups.
Yeah, so the difference I think at the moment to make is clear is that there's Capital E and then there's the National Theatre for Children. And they're kind of the same because they are at the moment, but there has been talk within the industry of what if there is a slightly separate National Theatre for Children that is our totara funded, like our leader of young people's theatre. And there's a lot of issues within working in that the umbrella of Experience Wellington, and the fact that it's Wellington based, it's not nationally based. So there's quite a bit of stuff that needs to be worked out there. The National Theatre for Children, I see that as something that could have groups come into it. So we have Trick of the Light, we have different, companies that come in. We have Young and Hungry Perform. We have a theatre space where all the independent artists, Long Cloud can come in, Duffy Theatre can come down from Auckland, and so that we actually use that space to really focus on young people. Theatre, it's a theatre space for young people and by young people, and it's all the, the groups that schools can come in and use it. So that's a really flexible space that can be kind of used in all sorts of ways, but can be really dedicated to young people. And I think in the way that you create the space, you've got to take that into consideration. So downstage, for example, has been used a lot by Capital E. It's hopeless. The children flip through the seats, for example. It's so inaccessible for wheelchairs. So what we want to do is build one from sort of scratch, even that really talks to those accessibility things. That's really accessible in all sorts of ways, not just wheelchair access. I mean, kids can sit on the ground, on cushions, how does that work? How does that look? And I think it takes quite a lot of thinking, but there are definitely examples throughout the world of theatres that are purpose-built and that become a hub for young people.
Yeah. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Kieran. And we were talking about my young actor in the family. And one thing that I'm interested if you've been to sort of had experience working at Waitohi, because they use the room there. They like my daughter did a self. The student-directed piece for Sheila Wynne.
Oh, yeah.
They used the spaces there at Waitohi for free rehearsal space.
Yep.
And, so I guess that does show the sort of model that we can use.
This is the one in Kapiti, right?
No, Johnsonville.
Johnsonville. Oh, yes, sorry, the library space in Johnsonville. Yeah, I was just thinking the Kapiti Performing Arts Centre is another really good space. Yeah, so it's all encompassing. It's a creative space. And I think, the rehearsal rooms and having studios or music studios and all that sort of thing that becomes... I think Waitohi is a really great example of a space that people are really talking about too. And people are like, wow, have you seen this? You can go and do overlocking there, it's great. So, it's that sort of thing. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Councillors, are there any other partai? Carl? Well, thank you, Kieran, again.
Thanks for listening. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Right, we've got Jackson Lacey joining us online, representing Tawa Community Board. No mai, haere mai, Jackson.
Kia ora whānau.
The deal, 10 minutes.
I do know the deal. I'll start my stopwatch. So kia ora te whānau, he nui te mihi ki ngā kaukauhera katoa me ngā kaimahi katoa te kaunihera. Basically, I want to have a bit of a yarn about the board's thoughts on the draft strategy, and then if it's all good with you, we'll open it up to some pathway. So I absolutely commend the strategy. You're going to hear from Youth Council this afternoon, I think. But I personally really commend officers for giving Youth Council such a strong part to play in the drafting of the strategy and in work going forward. I massively commend council and officers for taking that approach, and that basically means that we've got a really good draft strategy. We've got a really good, solid draft that the board strongly commends. Just a few major points that I want to hit. Support for local and school-based wellbeing services. We've got a few major challenges in Tawa as regards hauora. 2020 wasn't a good year for anyone, but it was a particularly bad year for Tawa. We had a lot of issues around youth mental health and wellbeing and self-harm that we really, really need to deal with. Tawa College got 6 months, 2 terms, I think it was, provisional funding from the Ministry of Education for a social worker. They couldn't assign it to any long-term, they couldn't assign the social worker to any long-term cases because they knew the funding wasn't going to last. We need real long-term strong solutions for local and school-based wellbeing services. That may not necessarily be within council's remit to directly fund, but either way, I very, very strongly advocate the council itself advocate for these services as is promised under Focus Area 2.4 of the action plan. Just want to highlight Take 10 Arvos. Thank you very much for funding it and for continuing to funding Take 10 and Take 10 Arvos. It's an amazing service. I've spoken to a number of Tawa-based rangatahi who say it's absolutely brilliant, and we need to cultivate it, let it grow, and be a really good example of beneficial services for our suburbs. supporting our underprivileged whānau and rangatahi. I really commend council for its work on advocating for initiatives that reduce poverty. Particular areas, focus areas 3.3 and 3.4 of the action plan, which work around social and community housing. Very strongly urge council in its considerations over what to do with the social housing and city housing issues to look at housing for young people as a dedicated specific issue, because there are parts of the issue that make it very different than housing for others, especially when you consider income differentials. And essentially anytime, as another sub point, anytime the council has partnered with Te Ahuru Mōwai in the housing arm of Ngāti Toa, I think it's been a pretty been a pretty damn good success, and I'm pretty sure anyone you talk to who's interacted with them would back me up on that. I can see Jill fervently nodding, very small on my screen. Additionally, Kai Kitchen in Linden as a way of supporting young people. It's not mostly an event for rangatahi like that in terms of numbers, but the rangatahi who do go get a hell of a lot out of it as both attendees and as volunteers. I think anything council can do to support that program better, to help Feza and the team down there, anything you can do would be greatly appreciated. Strongly support council's intention to continue with planned Te Tauhiu initiatives. Very strongly support that. We need to realise the realities for rangatahi Māori in the city, that as a consequence of colonisation, slightly personal comments here, don't necessarily take this as full opinion of the board, but I'm a rangatahi Māori who's been disconnected from my whakapapa by consequences of colonisation, and I think I'm one of many, and we need to figure out what our place as a city is in correcting those harms. Council strongly supports the vision of strong pathways for rangatahi into education and employment, including through the kahui-ako. The kahui-ako in Tawa has been doing a really good job of working on that stuff. We share council concerns around whether fees and fines are barriers to youth access to libraries. We think we really need to think about that one very carefully. There's a decent chance that we lose far more in the stunted potential of our rangatahi as a consequence of these fines and fees than we might gain from the associated revenue. Finally, really important to touch on public transport, working with Greater Wellington to ensure that young people who don't have or don't want to use cars for their transport can still get around, and highlighting once again the issues of which councillors will be well aware as regards to public transport issues in Tawa. Finally, Richard Herbert, one of our board members, asked me to mention a few things that weren't in our written submission in terms of supporting safe places for our youth to gather and express themselves, noting especially the community boards startup funding or spark funding for the wharenui at Tawa College. It's a really important development, and anything we can do to get that off the ground, the better. Getting the basics right for food security, community gardens particularly. Tawa's got a really strong one. Any support for that, the better. And providing a sense of place for all of our diverse communities. Linden Community Centre and Feza down there have really done a really good job of running, for example, the recent Eid Festival event that I think a number of councillors were at. That went bloody brilliantly, and I think the more council can do to support providing places for all of our diverse communities, the better. Pātai mai.
Kia ora, Jackson. Councillors, is there any
Kia ora.
Councillor O'Neill has.
Kia ora, Terry.
Tēnā koe, Jackson. My question is around, we've had a couple of different groups of young people come and talk to us, particularly about the youth strategy covering off the needs of teenagers. Would you be able to give a couple of comments about what that looks like in and around Tawa, and how, if there maybe is a difference between the needs of young people in Tawa versus the needs of young people in our CBD?
I think it's about access to services. One of the major challenges. It's actually relatively easy to access youth services in the CBD. You've got Evolve, you've got the new Te Wāhi Āwhina, and you've got Take 10. All the big youth services are based around the CBD. We simply don't have that in Tawa. We've got very little or no access to any kind of youth services, any kind of specific youth health or wellbeing services in Tawa. A lot of service providers I've spoken to have said, oh, they can just go to Porirua or they can just go to the CBD, and it's true. We've got great transport links to Porirua and the CBD, but that's a big hurdle for young people who have wellbeing or transport or income issues. I think that's one of the main issues you're going to face. Another issue you're going to face is, it's something I faced when I was in high school, and I think if you speak to Tawa College students, you'll see the exact same thing, is connection to the rest of the community. Tawa is a community that doesn't have a ton of dedicated social spaces for young people. Wellington's got that same problem right now, but Wellington at least used to have readings in the central library. Tawa's never had anything. It's about connection, be to services or to spaces.
Thank you, Jackson, for taking the time to come and kōrero with us. We appreciate that.
Oh, is that it? I don't know. I can't. My screen's gone all weird. It's not your fault, but I can't see you anymore. So is that all the questions?
Yep, that's all the pātai for now. We can still see you.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your meeting, and say hi to Youth Council for me.
Will do. We'll see you later on.
Right. Have a good one.
Bye. Right, now I'd like to welcome Generation Zero. We've got Eleanor West and I think some other colleagues. No mai, haere mai, kia koutou.
Susie and Janine with me today.
Kia ora, welcome, thank you. So you guys have 10 minutes and there may be some questions in that time if you allow a bit of extra time. Kia ora.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us today. We'd really like to thank the council officers who drafted this youth strategy, in particular Kate Hodgetts and her team. They came along to one of our Generation Zero meetings a few months ago to collect our feedback and our thoughts, and we really appreciated her proactive approach to engagement. We're super supportive of the initiatives set out in this strategy, but we do have serious concerns about the ability of the council to implement these if they don't start taking more ambitious action on the housing crisis, the climate crisis, transport inequities, and the lack of engagement from young people in local democracy. Without this action, this strategy is largely going to be a pointless ambulance at the bottom of the cliff.
As you guys know, a lack of affordable, accessible and healthy housing has incredibly detrimental effects on young people growing up and moving out of home. In Focus Area 3, you state that you want to improve the housing experiences of independent young people, but unless you allow for increased density in inner city suburbs through policies like the spatial plan to increase the housing stock, the housing experiences of young people are not going to improve. In your pathways section, you state that Wellington's tertiary education brings young people and vibrancy to the city, which I agree with, but the reality is that Wellington is becoming so expensive to live in that it is actually getting a national reputation amongst young people that only those with wealthy parents can afford to study here.
And I was fortunate enough to have the financial support to move here. My mother not only covered my first year in the fall of residence, but still continues to financially support me still a year after paying my rent. Many of my friends who were financially supporting themselves either ended up moving back home or they ended up needing to drop their education and sacrifice going to uni by working full-time. Renting in Wellington favours wealthy Pakeha students, favours wealthy Pakeha students and gives them, just a huge advantage as compared to other people.
Yeah, and since moving here in 2019, I'm from Dunedin, and I've seen 4 friends who have had to move home because they were unable to secure an affordable place to live. And it's of no coincidence that these friends come from single-parent households or low-income families. Just like it is no coincidence that my one friend from home who has been able to stay here is living in an apartment that her parents were able to buy for her after, years of planning. We think your You Belong strategy to increase diversity and inclusiveness is a wonderful initiative, but it's meaningless if it's not accompanied by measures that make Wellington a city that diverse groups of people can actually live in. Of my friends who have had to leave, 2 are Pacifica and 1 is Māori. Māori and Pacifica communities are disproportionately low income, and the increased cost of living in Wellington is pricing out the very diversity that you claim to want to encourage, which is really concerning. And housing shortages affect children too. My boyfriend grew up with a single mother in Wellington's rental market, and by the time he was 18, they'd had to move 8 times as their rents kept increasing to unaffordable levels. This, obviously impacted his friendships growing up, his schooling, his sense of stability, and even like his ability to decorate his room or get a pet, which are important things for kids growing up. So the housing crisis is not only affecting students and young professionals and people at that stage of their life, but it's actually really affecting parents and children growing up here too. And although the measures outlined in the strategy are great initiatives, they need to be partnered with strong action on the housing crisis. Increased density is also essential to cutting our transport emissions and achieving our goal of Te Atakura first to zero. This is directly in the interests of young people and children because we're going to be inheriting the climate crisis in the coming decades. So it's directly, in their interests. So a strategy for children and young people that is not combined with an ambitious spatial plan is not going to have any tangible effects on the well-being of children and young people.
The Council needs to make progress on transport and inequities to ensure initiatives like the Youth Hub can be accessed equally. Throughout the years, low-income communities have been pushed further out of the city, increasing their dependency on public active transport, despite these having significantly fewer transport options. This alienates the demographic that are most dependent on the public transport to get to work or school even. The high cost further contributes to these issues and makes transportation throughout the city even more inaccessible for youth.
Students I interviewed for a university research project from Rongotai College unanimously stated that despite the diverse nature of their student body, friend groups were highly segregated. A key reason cited for this was that Māori and Pacifica students were often from outer city suburbs such as Porirua, whilst other students were from the eastern suburbs like Island Bay and Miramar. It was difficult for them to hang out on the weekend or after school, making it difficult for out-of-school friendships to grow. Transport inequity was cited as a key reason for this, and a specific barrier, as it was complex and expensive to meet up with students who weren't in neighbouring suburbs. 3 years after graduation, they now have almost no contact with students from outer city suburbs while remaining close with the friends that they saw a lot of. Transport inequities thus have significant impact on our social cohesion, our friendships with different demographics, and thus the general well-being and inclusivity of our city. This is only exacerbated by rising house prices that make the central suburbs increasingly unaffordable for low-income families.
For the Council to tackle their goals around accessibility and diversity, dealing with transport inequities for young people is essential. A suggestion on how to best address these transport inequities on youth is to implement free public transport on the weekends for kids and teenagers. This will build a stronger sense of independence and autonomy amongst youth, while also encouraging young people to travel throughout the city safely. This will also encourage the culture around public transport usage in Wellington, another key step to cutting our emissions and achieving Te Atakura.
We really like the ideas set out on the participating in change section of the strategy, but we can't emphasise enough how urgent it is that the council makes council more accessible to young people. I wanted to speak quickly to our experiences as Generation Zero and set out some of the barriers we faced. We found that there's a really high barrier of knowledge and understanding before you can even begin to participate. Consultation documents are often dense, complicated, and the information's not presented in a very accessible way or in multiple media formats to make it more easily digestible. The process of submitting is complicated and off-putting. For instance, the requirement to have an account on Let's Talk is enough of a barrier that it puts young people off. Consultation questions are structured in a way that makes it really hard to leave general comments and makes you feel like if you're not specific, your comment is not valued. There are way too many consultations. We are suffering so badly from consultation fatigue. We feel constant pressure to hold this space because if we don't submit, the voices of young people are being drowned out by privileged folk who have time to participate. It should be enough for a young person to tell you once to do something on the housing crisis. We shouldn't have to turn up to every meeting to talk about the climate crisis and tell you exactly where to put your buses. There's an ongoing assumption from council that when young people don't submit, it's because they don't care. It's not because we don't care, it's because we're exhausted. The consultation process favours privileged people who are not suffering from housing stress, working multiple jobs, and actually have time to commit. Engagement opportunities are during the day, when young people are at school, university, or work. This favours people who are being paid by interest groups to participate or who have financial privilege. These opportunities can be intimidating, and there's often very little support offered for first-time submitters. We're often forced to share our platforms with older people in debate-style sessions that are uncomfortable and disempowering. There seems to be very little acknowledgement of the severe power imbalance in these processes. When I joined the roundtable sessions on the spatial plan last year, 4 of the people at my table owned homes in Mount Vic, and 1 of them owned a home in Thorndon. I was completely outnumbered. I've personally experienced being followed out of these sessions and harassed by other submitters about the things that I've said. Without any council staff stepping in, and that's not a diss to the council staff, everyone is super busy, but I do think there needs to be dedicated support to making these spaces more accessible for young people, because the council's failing to provide a safe environment for young submitters. And our final point is, unless you're actively seeking out submissions from people who are not already a part of your system, you're going to have a self-confirming system. Making the occasional trip to a university to seek input from reasonably privileged students is not good enough. Young people lack the resource, privilege, and understanding and time to engage in the council standard processes that favour older, affluent people. The council needs to invest time and money in actively seeking feedback from the underrepresented groups to ensure representative consultation processes. Yeah. Any further comments?
I completely agree with all of that about gets it all.
That's us.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you so much for sharing that, and I want to acknowledge that it's not okay that you had that experience, and we will have to really reflect on that being something that happened. But I just wanted to ask you, talked about the processes of consultation, how that doesn't work. What would be some things that you think would work around, better engagement coming to you?
I think the council needs to be running more sessions, inviting young people along and not being so specific about what they're trying to get out of the young people. Like, come along and we'll talk about the vision for the future. And yes, this is low-key consultation on the spatial plan, but then equip them with the knowledge they need to actually be able to answer your questions instead of coming in and saying, what do you think about this? Because they're not going to be able to articulate good, well-reasoned examples if they're not given the tools to think about it. I just think there needs to be more investment in time.
Like, a great example would be, Jill, the event that you were at a few weeks ago on like the future of Wellington and the long-term plan, where it was a lot of young people engagement, and it was a really friendly, supportive environment to talk with you about the policies and to talk with each other and with people who were more informed. That was like the perfect type of event to get young people and students engaged in the process. But
so council coming to you in that environment would be...
Yeah, and with other people who you can, feel that you can just ask questions of and get a good understanding of the policies before coming and presenting to all of you.
Awesome. Councillor Matthews has a partai. Anyone else have any questions? No? Well, thank you so much for coming in and for the work that you do, keeping on coming back. We do appreciate it. Now I'd like to welcome Ross and Eddie from BGI. No mai haere mai. Hey, thank you.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Oh.
Well, thank you. So you know how it works. You've got 10 minutes and there will likely be some questions for you.
So, kia ora koutou. It was good to hear the Generation Zero. We came along a bit early to hear what they had to say. However, I suppose our experience is sort of quite differing from the last submitter, in that there is a diverse range of young people in the group, the Te Ahi o Ngā Rangatahi that Eddie runs, that have had a huge, for a wide range of suburbs and income, race, gender, etc., who have all, we've really come along to say thanks to Kate for engaging and listening to young people's views without taking away from that young person's experience who just spoke. And we think it's captured their perspectives really well. And a big mihi to Kate, Ariel and Donna for coming last night and seeing the group in action, even when, the strategy is almost done, they still came up. For people like me, who've been doing youth work for 40 years, you can get a bit jaded, think you sort of know it, and they haven't. They've wanted fresh opinions. They've come, as I say, like last night, out of hours. Even this time, I felt, I actually assumed it was going to be during the day, and to see that it's changed to 5 o'clock. I didn't see it soon enough, but we could have, with some young people that were going to come, but then a bit of a crisis in there. There was 2 of them that were going to come with us, but they, one of them's in a bit of a crisis, and they said to pass on their thanks though for actually changing the time to this sort of time that possibly doesn't suit families and that sort of thing. So that from an organisational point of view, so we feel you have listened to young people's voice directly, not through BGI, but directly, but also from an organisational point of view, we support everything in it. There wasn't really anything in there that we had an issue with. I think the Youth Hub is a really good opportunity to make sure the council works well with young people in its design. BGI feel that it should be a youth space, not a youth organisation space. Us included, I would say Zeal, Evolve included. It shouldn't really be our space. It should be designed, named by young people from a diverse range of schools and organisations. And importantly, run by someone who's really passionate about it and supports young people to get stuff done. One thing we noticed also just going through was the focus on the word safety came up a lot in the first 3 focus things. While it's obviously important, it perhaps shouldn't be a top priority and shouldn't have that sort of security feel to it. That possibly goes without saying, but rather than just a positive space for young people want to be in, which naturally helps with safety, but isn't the number one. One of the main things young people we connected with wanted to raise was regards to the environment, was that some focus on the initiatives to get young people involved in the environment. The young people identified that some of the goals and actions from the environmental strategy would be good to include in this youth strategy because it's a basic need, and to see practical progress on environmental issues is good for their well-being and things like that. So that was mentioned in the written submission too. I'm just really elaborating on the things we've got. In terms of belonging, young people raised some more purposeful opportunities to engage with Māori culture are needed for young Māori. This links to the Council's commitment to build a plan with Manafenua to support aspirations of rangatahi and tamariki. It's important that the programs and initiatives that are developed out of this plan are also financially supported by the Council. There was one tick box missing there, I think, in the action plan at the back there, that where funding wasn't provided for, didn't have the dollar thing ticked, but that actual way of laying things out I thought was really great. I suppose for me personally, through doing some of the courses with Manafenua, I think it has led to a greater sense of belonging to the city, and enabling those sort of wānanga and sort of deeper engagement with the generosity of Te Atiawa to not just Pākehā here, but other iwi here. Obviously, they can't blow their own trumpet about that, but for those of us who have sort of discovered that, it's good. It helps you sort of feel like you belong, and under that belonging heading, I think those Manafenua stories would be relevant. So, I think that's sort of a summary of, just a few things to add, and but as I say at the beginning, the main thing was just a thank you for listening. I think the layout's great. It is accessible. There was a one-pager that came along to that with this, which I think made it. All the comments in our submission were from young people, so I'm just really here to add a bit of weight to what they've said. So, kia ora. Eddie's here to help with the questions because he knows more about it than me.
Cool, kia ora. Councillors, are there any pātai? Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora, Ross and Eddie, and also happy birthday for your birthday just gone. Ross, yeah. My question was around social infrastructure and support. So we've heard from some young people today that in the plan they're really kind of missing some teeth around supporting teenagers in particular. Were there any specific teenager-specific comments that came through this plan and feedback? Apart from, I guess, BGI is all teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Zero talked about, that Generation Zero talked about was as another thing that they keep emphasising is that, yeah, it's got to be accessible. We've got to have access to all the things that Wellington Council is doing and awareness of those things as well. So, yeah, is that
cool? And then, sorry, just a second pātai on that. So you mentioned that youth wanted to see things like climate change and environmental goals as a part, and goals for Māori engagement. What ways should we communicate that out to young people so that they feel like that we're listening to their priorities? Or how do we distinguish it as a young people priority while communicating milestones in that regard as well?
I mean, when I was thinking celebrating even small things with young people, that we've now got, more electric cars or, more this, more that, less of this and less of that, just small celebrations of something that gives them the hope that we're getting a bit of practical traction, Anything you've got?
Yeah, I think it is just that they had engaged with this because it was the Children and Young People strategy and didn't see direct environmental stuff in there other than initiatives that were supporting them to get involved. But the environment's a big thing. Obviously, we know that for young people. So just including that in this strategy is really important. It's a basic need to have a place to live and whenua and not be in the sea. So just involving that in this strategy it'd probably be quite important, I think.
I've got a pātai. Eddie, you were here the other day when we had the kōrero with a whole lot of community organisations about the Youth Hub. What do you see as an important way forward for establishing the Youth Hub? How should we do that in a way that is going to meet the needs of young people?
Yeah, and involving young people obviously is the big thing. Really, really authentically and meaningfully, and it's got to be on their terms, in their timeframes, and that sort of thing, relational, and then it's got to be able to be flexible and evolve and develop, because today's young people aren't 6 years away as young people, and having that ability to be dynamic and move with the times and have young people in its governance and that sort of thing is a really important thing for me.
Kia ora, that's very helpful. Thank you. Tēnā kōrua, thank you both for coming in to kōrero with us. We really appreciate you doing that. Thank you. So now I'd like to invite, I think Toby, you've been here all day. Let's get you back and we'll have a kōrero about this strategy. Thank you for your commitment to being here to share your whakaaro with us. And councillors, he joined in with kapahaka today, so
yeah, that was unexpected.
So Toby, you've got 5 minutes. You're getting pretty used to this now, but there might be some questions.
Any pātaka any questions from any of the...
do you just want to go straight to questions, do you?
Might as well.
We're just going to check up on your submission online, because then we can make sure we're talking about the right one.
Is there anything that submitters that you've heard being in the gallery or at the round tables today that surprised you, or more stuff that like you hadn't thought of before that you think is important?
I'm trying to remember what I put in my submission and what I forgot to put in. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but the Te Whare Tapawha model for wellbeing is quite a useful model to look at for in general, and yeah, it fits in with all people. So I may have forgotten to mention that, but yeah, I find it quite useful looking at the aspects of a person, the physical, tinana, the mental, emotional, hinenaro, and the whānau, family and friends, and wairua, spiritual well-being as well. It's really useful.
I'm just looking at your submission. You talk about having non-alcoholic events, particularly. Obviously, we're talking about young people. What sort of things and places do you think that we could address that approach with? Because obviously, it's something that sometimes young people are drawn to. How can we make it appealing to go to other events which isn't based on alcohol?
Well, there is a lot of appeal for it because it's a lot safer, and I think education is a big one. Like when I grew up, there was absolutely no education whatsoever about alcohol. I had no idea of the dangers, the harms. I just had to learn the hard way, and it was a very traumatic experience. So yeah, there's a big, and it's not just all councils, basket, it's a collaboration, central government needs to, the education system, like the health education at my college was just rubbish, it was just hardly anything. And yeah, there needs to be, but council can, help, encourage, have a part in cooperation with Hauora, with the health system, with central government, with education system, so yeah.
Thank you. We've got another question from Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora, Toby. I'm interested, this isn't directly about your submission, but we just had some challenges put to us by the people from Generation Zero about how difficult it can be to come and talk to us and to make a submission. And have you got any feedback on that, on what we could do to make it a better and more welcoming experience, or how to make it easier for people to tell us what they want us to do or what they think about the city?
I guess just knowing about what's coming up, what the submissions open are coming up and so on is the main thing, because this one was quite last minute for me and quite rushed, but I'm very thankful, and I think council are doing quite a good job on it. I submitted yesterday to Parliament, which I've done before, and this is a much more pleasant experience, I must say. I'm very grateful. And the first time, I was really terrified. I'm actually quite a shy person, but yeah, I found it quite, I found it quite a good experience, really positive. So, I'd just say keep up the good mahi and keep on progressing. And thank you.
Kia ora, Toby. That's all the pātai, that's all the questions today. Thank you so much for your commitment to being here to share your whakaaro, your thoughts with us. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Tiger Francis, no mai haere mai Tiger, who's going to come and talk to us, and he's also going to speak, I think, on behalf of his father, Kevin, who couldn't make it in. Yep. So we'll give you a little bit extra time because 5 minutes won't probably be enough to do that.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Well, it's my first time doing something like this, so I'm very nervous inside. Thanks. The main point, me and my dad had similar points, so I'm kind of just going to merge what we're going to say. It's about improving skateboarding, in the Wellington community. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that there's probably a lot of submissions about that recently. Well, I'll just speak from kind of my personal experience as a skateboarder in Wellington first. It doesn't feel very welcoming towards people like me, especially young growing up. A lot of the locations that, we can skate out in the outskirts. You know, there's a place called Treetops, which is beyond Newtown. But for someone who's young or someone who's, you know, I go to Massey University, so I've got to pay for public transport and that, and I don't get a lot of time to be able to skateboard because it's a sport, and it's also kind of like an escape from harsh reality. So it's a struggle to have to go so far out to do something you enjoy, because a lot of the closer locations are kind of quite run down, or they're just not, the environment around them isn't good, you know. You get a lot of dodgy groups or whatever hanging around, and so it doesn't make it very safe to be there, and especially at times like nighttime, because, you know, for a lot of people, that's the only time they can come out to do that. And I mean, one thing that's been mentioned, which would be amazing, is an indoor facility that properly supports skateboarding. Before I was born, if I'm correct, there was the skate pit, I think. It was near where the stadium is, and it was an indoor skateboard facility. And, you know, I think you had to pay to get in, and, you know, it was a way for that community to be together, be in a safer environment, and, you know, on rainy days or dark days, you know, you could be there. And I believe the Kilburnie Recreation Centre used to quite support skating, you know, had ramps and that, but in recent years has just dramatically decreased. And so that's one thing. Indoor facilities would be extremely beneficial to a lot of people. And it's more than just skateboarding as well, you know. It's people who rollerblade or scooter or whatever. Another one is, as I mentioned before, that the Wellington's not very welcoming of skateboarding, and a lot of that's kind of people's general attitude towards it, because it often gets made out, you know, that skateboarders are just dodgy people, or they just want to wreak havoc. But it also comes down to things like knobbing benches or putting no skateboarding signs down on locations that could easily support it. And because for the most part, you know, 99% of the time, skateboarders are respectful of the people around them. They're not going to try to skate a bench or some stairs where there's people, you know, walking on them, or, you know, when it's busy. And so, you know, unnobbing benches, taking away no skateboarding signs would probably be a good first step and cheap step to, you know, decrease, what's the word? The opposition towards skateboarding. And this bit's from my dad. Well, from what I hear, apparently you guys have agreed to put $1.5 million into skateboarding funding, which, I mean, I think is good, but he's got a list here. Masterton Skate Park has recently received $1.3 million to improve a skate park there. Christchurch has received $3.2 million. And yeah, and what he's is kind of pushing for is there's improving cycle lanes over the next 10 years is what, $100 million? $220 million. So, I mean, yeah, pretty much, you know, just, you know, 1% of that would be, you know, it would be extremely beneficial. And it's about being more welcoming, and for young people to have a place where they can actually, you know, support their sport and learn and, you know, be around that culture. Because at the moment you have to go far out your way to do that. And if you do that, you're often labeled, you know, you're put in a group that doesn't define you, you know. It's at this point.
We do have some questions.
Yeah.
If you want to answer those?
That would
Do you
be
wanna do
great.
that? Okay, so got a question from Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora.
Hello.
Firstly, I just wanted to say a big thank you because without your dad's organising alongside Bailey and Duncan, we probably wouldn't have that 1.5 million there.
Yep.
I just wanted to really acknowledge how much work your dad put in, probably you too. But literally everyone who came to this table most of the time mentioned your dad as being the reason they're here. My question was around the 1.5 million is designed for upgrades all around. So we're looking at Kilburney Park, right by the Zephyr meter, the yellow one, orange one, sorry. And then we're also looking at Waitangi Park. Are those kind of are they the right areas to be investing in? Are there some areas that we should add to the list that need just a little bit of extra funding?
Well, I mean, Waitangi Park's it's the only park in central Wellington, so upgrading that, making it better is certainly a good thing. There's other locations, that don't have a place that could become skate-friendly. There's in Lower Hutt, next to the council building, I believe, there's a small plaza, which, it's got some banks, it's got some ledges. It's a perfect skate spot that's in the city, and it's friendly. And there's a couple of locations, I think I've got them written down. Just give me a second. Yeah, there's a couple of small locations in the city, which with a little work could, just add a bank or a ledge, and it becomes this skate spot, and yeah.
Got a partai from Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora, I have a new life ambition. I want to do a mother-daughter mission. That's something. Thank you. And I guess, I've learned a lot from the emails we've received about the kind of the culture within skateboarding, and people talking about if you're not into organised sport, or maybe you accepting people who are a bit different. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, because it's obviously something that you kind of grew up immersed in, and what that culture has been like for you?
Well, I mean, I grew up I'm quite a shy and lonely person, I'm not, what's the word? I'm an introvert. So I don't get out much, but, the skate park's the one place I do go to, you go there, you see people, doing the same sort of thing as you, whether it's at a different level, whether they're older than you, younger than you. It's just a place where you support each other, really. You push each other on, try this, try that, you did good. And, for mental health, for me personally, that's good. And it provides an escape, And yeah, that's the basics from my perspective.
Well, kia ora, Tiger. Thank you very much for coming in and sharing your whakaaro and your experiences with us, and also for representing your dad.
Yep.
It was really good of you to be able to do that. So thank you. Awesome. Kia ora.
Cheers.
Kia ora.
Have a good one.
You too. Now I'd like to invite Laura. I think we've got Laura and Ella here from Youth Council, who are going to do two submissions in a row. The first one on the Children and Young People Strategy, and then the next one on Aho-Tini. So we'll let you do one, and then we'll ask some questions.
First. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
I'm Ella. I'm the Deputy Chair of Youth Council. And I'm Laura. Thank you all for hearing me yet again. You had me for 30 minutes today, so I really appreciate that. Awesome. So doing back-to-back, I think we're the last people, so home straight. Yeah, home time after this. Thanks for letting us put our two back-to-back. It saves less in and outs throughout the day, so I really appreciate that. Awesome. So Children and Young People Strategy. First of all, we'd like to extend our thanks to the council staff who involved us from the very beginning alongside Te Ahi o Ngā Rangatahi. That was really meaningful and really wonderful to be part of forming the strategy. So in summary, Youth Council really supports this strategy, and we also support the 1 to 3 year timeline for the implementation of it. Due to the importance of the strategy, we'd also like to urge Council to ensure that the work doesn't end here, and the goals and outcomes of the strategy remain a priority over time, and there are also clear check-in times to check on progress alongside the strategy. So a few of our main points I'll just run over. So the first one is that Youth Council supports using effective advertising to ensure that young people are aware of the facilities and opportunities and resources that Council can bring, and also the role it plays. So ensuring that they're enabled to access decision making and have their own say as well. We also see a necessity in a warm, free, safe space for young people in the city, so the Youth Hub. And this would look like an accessible space in the central city that's welcoming to all young people from all backgrounds and identities, potentially with access to resources and a place to relax, most essentially. And that'll come down to the actual implementation and how that's done. And would also love for lots of groups to be consulted in that process. Honouring Te Tiriti and partnering with tangata whenua when making decisions is essential, as well as working with a diverse range of communities to ensure cultural wellbeing in the city. So with all the things that come along with the strategy, ensuring that that is a priority the entire way through. Partnering with agencies to improve accessibility to the natural environment is super important to us as well. And we also welcome the approach to support new, emerging and growing recreational activities. So this could be something like parkour, which was mentioned, and seeing that rolled out across the city. Youth Council also believes in the importance of advocating for child poverty issues on behalf of the community and facilitating solutions for young people experiencing homelessness along the way. And also making sure that there's affordable housing and increasing rollout of that is incredibly important. And the last one is Youth Council strongly agrees in extending the reach of libraries through the Youth Engagement Plan. It's also important that education, knowledge and resources are accessible to our children and young people. So those are our main points on the strategy. And
Councillor Zini Patai. We've got fatigue going on here. Councillor Matthews, we should have had a few lollies.
It's time to get some energy.
Long day.
We had a submission earlier from some students from Wellington Girls College, and they actually, one thing they suggested was the idea of teenage playground.
Oh.
And kind of wondering if you kind of had any thoughts about that, because they were sort of saying you go to a kid playground, it's for little kids, and but actually what we want to do is maybe some kind of joint physical activities with our friends where we get to hang out but we're doing something. And they also had lots of suggestions about things in the Youth Hub like charges and and also talked about the adult to young person ratio. And it'd be good to hear your thoughts about that too.
Yeah. Cool. Are you? With the teenage playground, that sounds really cool. I'm sure I'd be open to that. Oh, thank you.
Stealing your guys' lollies.
Thank you. I mean, Levin's super cool. Like just on the top of my head, thinking about the sorts of things that, like rock climbing walls or, spaces that, those sorts of sports that young people are quite interested in getting into and stuff. I know they're quite fun to hang out with. And yeah, a space that young people can just feel like they can go.
I think also it's quite important trying to include that accessibility to different fitness opportunities in that sense. I know I've seen overseas some councils you can get all of those built in, they look like playground things, but they're designed to be like a workout circuit and things like that, which is always a cool opportunity. If there was a space for that somewhere along the waterfront, being able to build in those sort of opportunities for physical activity beyond just the classic suggestion of go run Oriental Bay, because that's kind of
it's like
do that so often.
It's almost like when you're going around Karori Park or
the big 1 kilometre circuit, and they have different exercise things along the way. That's quite fun to hang out on as well. And also about the youth hub, providing charges is really like a really good idea. It will definitely draw young people in. Yesterday, I was just going to say, I think part of the youth hub thing needs to be that real big focus on making sure that it's young people who are designing it. We've seen it happen far too often where it's for young people, but we just get brought in at the end to tick the box kind of thing. And I think the benefit of the child and young person strategy throughout its creation is how collaborative it's been with young people, particularly us in Te Ahi, right the way through, and that's part of its strength, and that's why it has ended up with so much credibility in the community, because as soon as you're sitting there saying that, yeah, council's actually built this with young people, there's a lot more trust in a strategy right from the get-go, as opposed to the more sort of typical manner, which is just consultation at the end. But I think another discussion we've been having with the Youth Hub is trying to find that in between trying to just make it super, super basic, because at the bare minimum, our idea for this came from just what used to be Reading cinemas, and there was nothing flash about that. It was literally just a warm space to hang out, and that's kind of the bare minimum, but it will make a massive difference. But it's finding the line between that, which should be relatively easy to set up, towards all of the possible aspirations that we could have for the space. And I think it's going to be important to develop that slowly rather than going the alternative approach, which is trying to commit to all of this stuff and then we don't end up with anywhere for a very long time. At least those sort of additions can be built into the space as it develops. But yeah, charging and Wi-Fi is kind of basic for young people. No, beanbags are a classic. Actually, yesterday at Te Ahi, we had an amazing discussion about the possibilities for the Youth Hub, and just hearing the range of opinions there made me realise, oh my gosh, there's so much potential and there's so many different opinions on what makes this space a great space. So yeah, that comes down to the consultation as well. And I think there's also been a lot of hype around it, because even for us on our own social media channels, being able to come out and tangibly say council has agreed to invest this much money in a space just for young people is quite a big statement from council, where young people don't really tend to care about what council's doing. But when you come out and see that you've got, what was it, over $600,000 for young people, that's a big step for council.
Sorry, we're just establishing that we didn't steal lollies. We don't actually know whose they are, but we've just eaten them. Sorry, we need to try and stay focused. Oh, I can confirm that council is working on calisthenics space, which is what you're talking about exercise areas with a group of people who are experts in calisthenics. So there is some work happening in that area to provide something. But Councillor Panna also has a question.
Thank you for your submissions. Lots of good ideas, and thank you for working so hard on it. I just asked the Wellington girls students about adult young person ratio. So it's great that everyone's been collaborative, but I'm just curious, when you're talking about young people's spaces, about how much adult involvement is too much before it starts to have credibility issues?
I think when you're talking about adult involvement, that's sort of when those sort of definitional aspects come into play. Because I think even within youth council, the fact that we're 14 to 24, if you were to have some of those leaders who are around, like even Ella and I's age, like 22, 23, 24, you can get some really experienced people who are still within that age bracket, and they can be the ones leading that space. I think about the people leading like Te Ahi and Zeal and Shift and things like that. A lot of them are towards the younger end of the scale, but they're still incredible leaders. They've got great experience. You get some great social workers who work for even just involvement in Take 10 and that sort of thing. So I think it would be looking at that balance between trying to involve organisations such as those who have got that establishment there and have already got those great community connections, but not looking at sort of the next too many generations away from the current young group, I would say.
Well, tēnā koroa, thank you so much for presenting on that one. So now we'll just let you like spin around on your seats or something. And so now they're going to back again.
Switch mindsets.
So now Ella and Laura are going to talk to us about Aho-Tini 2030.
Yes, thank you again. I really appreciate not having to come back earlier in the day. It's not ideal in exams having to pop in 3 times, so it was great being here only twice back to back. I just wanted to also, similar to the Child and Young Person Strategy, acknowledge our thanks for the council staff who put this together in terms of their collaboration. This was another strategy that they reached out to us right from its beginning, and we were able to have one of our members heavily involved in that, to the point, I think, Anastasia said that she'd sat down for like 5 hours to talk through this and then saw almost all of her suggestions included in this strategy. So to be able to tangibly have that involvement was really important, and it meant that when the final strategy came back to us, we were easily able to say like, yep, Anastasia helped write this, so we trust it. Just a couple of points in terms of the strategy itself. We're really supportive in terms of improving access to different facilities for creatives. It's quite a barrier, particularly for sort of young up-and-comers in the sort of musical area and that sort of thing, to actually find space that they can afford to practice in. So we mentioned this a little bit in our long-term plan submission as well, but trying to make use of spaces which are typically going to be empty after hours. We know that this end of the city has a lot of sort of not conference spaces, but has a lot of spaces which, as soon as you hit 5 p.m, they're going to be a lot quieter, they're not being used, even as Civic Square starts to be redeveloped, that sort of area. And so we think it's really important for council to be a partner in that attempt to try and improve the access to those areas. Another suggestion that we had in our submission was about creating a program specifically focusing on Manafenua. We're aware that there's been a lot of sort of art incorporation of that, such as with Te Aro Park and things like that. We're aware there's a lot of art installations recognising and involving Manafenua, but there's not as much of a cultural external involvement. Even just council support and building programs around Matariki and things like that, I think would be very well received by the community. And part of that is about telling the stories of Manafenua as well as other ethnic groups that we have in the city. Wellington is known for its diversity on a surface level, but I think that the council can do a lot more to be supporting the sharing of those stories in quite an external manner by having sort of events on the waterfront that really showcases the great diversity that Wellington has, and trying to make the most of that and promoting inclusion through that. Finally, a big concern that Youth Council had was in terms of supporting pathways of creatives through the city. We have some of the best national institutions in the country based in Wellington. When you look at School of Music, School of Dance, you've got, I've had a blank, but the Drama School. We've got all of these renowned institutions in Wellington, yet these students are being told almost from as soon as they start that if you want to do anything with this, you're going to have to leave the city, start looking at Australia, move to America. You're basically here for your 3-4 year degree and then to leave. And the fact that people are being told that when they're first arriving in Wellington is a really, really bad look. We need to be doing much more to try and ensure that there are long-term opportunities for these creatives. Cuba Duba is a great example of how the entire city can come together and celebrate our amazing musicians and creatives. However, that's a single one-off event. I guess you've got Newtown to a smaller extent, but neither of these events, even if creatives were to be involved in both of them, neither of them are going to bring enough income in to actually be able to support someone year round. So we would like to see the council supporting and encouraging more of these events so that there's actually a year-round program for creatives to engage in, so that we're able to have those long-term commitments and those long-term opportunities and pathways for young people. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
Kia ora. Are there any questions, councillors?
Totally understand if brains have switched off too much.
Councillor Foon's got one.
Kia ora, Laura. Yeah, no, thank you for bearing with us while we're looking blurry-eyed. Just around the talk about when people are coming to study in creative practices here, have you got direct experience that friends are actually having that?
Not myself, but that comes directly from Anastasia, who's currently a first-year music student at the New Zealand School of Music, and they were told within their first week that a large part of their program is going to be suggesting opportunities overseas, because you just can't get anything in Wellington. And so for a first-year student to be told that right off the bat, not a great look when you're beginning a 3-year degree in Wellington already with your sights set overseas.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's harsh.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the balance between, yes, you're definitely going to lose some creatives overseas. That's the nature of every industry, not just sort of arts, but it shouldn't be the first option. It should be a cool opportunity as opposed to the only option.
Oh, Tina. Oh, there's another question from Councillor Foon. She's getting on a roll.
It's the snakes.
I'm Councillor Fitzsimons.
One of the there have been, but one of the sorry, my words aren't connecting in my head, to be honest. In the submissions for Aho-Tini, there was one who had a vision that actually the vision or the organising purpose should be that Wellington should commit wholeheartedly to being a city for people under 30 by 2030. How does that sit with you?
I mean, I wouldn't make an absolute statement, but the motivation behind that I would certainly support.
Yeah.
I think a lot of young people, it's an easy city to live in because it's not like Auckland where you're so spread out and there's so many different areas that you can localise yourself in. Wellington is, because I'm an Aucklander, so I see the stark differences between the two cities. But the benefit that Wellington has is that wherever you're living, even if you're living out in the suburbs, you're going to be coming into the city centre for either that's for study, work or play. And so trying to really boost how much time and motivation for people to stay in the city centre would be a good opportunity to really work on that, particularly in terms of trying to keep people engaged for the classic broke student. I know we always get excited with things like the Lux Festival because you can go and walk around for free, or I can't remember the full name of it, but the Cities of Theatre that was on, is that right? Yeah, that was another great opportunity because you've got so much going on everywhere through the city that you can actually access for free. Same with Cuba Duba if you're not in the position to engage with all of the additions. So I think that's definitely a good aspiration in terms of just trying to make it more accessible and engaging. Wellington used to really, really promote the whole coolest city in the world, but I think we've lost that a little bit, particularly with COVID. People are looking for that community engagement. They're looking for a reason to get out and about and enjoy the city. And I think this is a prime opportunity to make the most of that.
Right. Ella, do you add to that, just with the youth council, with your...
Yeah, I'd second pretty much all of what Laura said. I mean, hearing from a lot of my friends who have come to Wellington, they really love the opportunities that are available, let's say gigs, especially the music culture, I think, is quite a big one for young people. So, yeah, just making sure that there are lots of opportunities to do that and also to connect to the natural environment. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with in Wellington in a way. You know, the Botanic Gardens is wonderful for students, but having events centred around that and having events out on the waterfront and stuff, I mean, all those sorts of things really make it a great city. Yeah.
Yeah, just...
yeah.
Kia ora. Well, tēnā koroa, that is our list of questions there. Thank you so much for your epic commitment.
Thank you.
You guys.
I also just want to acknowledge the fact that you come here today, but you've actually put a lot of work into the building of these strategies, and thank you to Youth Council for their commitment to that. Really
appreciate it. Hopefully you'll see a few new faces here over the next few months as we finally get members.
Sorry, Councillor Rush had a question. Would you like to ask your question?
No, I was just waving goodbye. And I'm going to have to shoot off, actually.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Cheers.
All right, now we have to do some of the kind of formal stuff of the meeting. So I'm going to put the motion forward for the recommendations for this item 2.3, the strategy of children and young people. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sparrow, awesome. Is there any debate? I do just want to say something, but it's very important. I want to acknowledge firstly actually both Youth Council and BGI Te Ahi o Ngā Rangatahi, who have put in a massive amount of work to help with the building of this strategy and making sure that the voice of young people are very much central in this strategy. It's been a huge commitment, and thank you. Really appreciate the work that's gone into that. But I also want to acknowledge and thank Kate, who has put so much work into this strategy. Kate is actually finishing up at council, I think it's next week, which. But you know what, Kate, you've left an amazing legacy here. The submissions that we've read and heard today are a huge endorsement of the work that you've done. I can say personally I have participated and seen your genuine engagement with the community, going out to the schools and to the various community groups, and I really want to acknowledge and thank you for the time that you've put into that, because it has been hugely time consuming, and to hear that you were also engaging even up till last night, wanting to hear as much as you can to make sure that everything is in its right place. I really want to acknowledge and thank you for that. And yeah, as I say, you've left a big legacy for our young people in Wellington. So thank you very much, and all the best for the time ahead. But yeah, let's for another round of applause. And this strategy is coming to us in a few weeks, so we will get the opportunity to talk about it again. But I did really want to acknowledge Kate through this process, because it's been a huge piece of work.
I want to move an amendment to stop her going.
Yeah. I don't know if we've got the power to do that, but anyway, we might like to. Anyway, I'm now going to put that to the vote. So those in favour, please raise your hands. Where they've gone. Yep. Yeah, so that is unanimous. You support that? Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. So that is unanimous. It's carried. So that is our end of our meeting. Kua mutu e tēnei hui, e tu e te karakia mutunga. Microphone on. Unu here, unu here, unu here, ki te uru tapu nui. Kia wātia, ngākau, te I te ara takatū. Koe ara e whakaerea a ki runga. Kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia. Ai te pō. Have a good evening.